Hi, Black Hollywood Live fans. What a morning. Last night, I went to bed thinking the headline was going to be Aaron Hernandez acquitted of double murder. This morning, convicted murderer who was acquitted of double murder is found dead in his jail cell. He's now called an innocent man. Stay with us for the explanation on Justice is Served.
You are tuned in to Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
Hello and welcome to today's Justice is Served. It is a small panel, just me and co-host and fellow attorney Yemi Abayomi. Thanks for joining me. My name is Chelsea Galicia, and we are going to get straight into the shocking news of today. This is a story that we have covered on the show for years, Aaron Hernandez, and to wake up this morning and read that he was found dead in his jail cell just a week almost to the day after being found not guilty of double murder was just shocking to me. How did you feel about this whole situation?
I think everyone was met with surprise about that because a lot of people were a little bit optimistic that maybe this could be the first part of maybe appeals in his other case in which he's serving life imprisonment. And that maybe, after a certain number of appeals, maybe that guilty verdict could be overturned and he might be a man sent home. So people were really surprised that given such a victory after such a long trial, that he would then commit suicide. And so I saw lots of different reactions online about that.
Most of the reaction is questioning whether or not he actually committed suicide or whether he was killed, because on the surface it doesn't make sense that somebody who was just declared to be not guilty of double murder would be happy, excited, and on the road perhaps to reclaiming their life, because as you said, his attorney had filed an appeal in the Odin Lloyd murder conviction, and he had beat this case, and so things were looking up, maybe.
Right. A lot of people felt that, it had been suggested that Odin Lloyd had been murdered, so quote unquote, to cover up because he was a witness to these double murders.
Yes.
So if Aaron Hernandez was not guilty of these double murders, maybe that gives him kind of an opening to say that I had no motive for killing Odin Lloyd, whether you believe that or not.
But that's not what an appeal would be about, because for people that have that line of thinking, they believe that an appeal is retrying the case, but it's not. It's a review of the record to see if the judge acted beyond the discretion given to judges.
Right. Has there been some level of impropriety? Was there something unduly prejudicial that was introduced that shouldn't have there? On an appeal, you'd really be looking at instances of some justice not being served, or there being some level of impropriety or evidence that was admitted that shouldn't have been admitted, which doesn't seem to be the case in the Odin Lloyd trial. So in reality, those people who think that, this could have meant that Odin Lloyd verdict might be overturned and Aaron Hernandez would be a free man, most people who feel that way, it's probably the wrong way to think about it. So for me, it wasn't entirely, it's always surprising when someone commits suicide, but to me, that victory, having been acquitted of that double murder, Aaron Hernandez still had to go back to his cell knowing that he's still serving a life term without the possibility of parole. So to the extent that being in jail by yourself is a depressing thing, the timing is off, but not entirely strange to me, given that he was still serving a life sentence.
But some of the things, Twitter is a fascinating tool of finding out all these theories that people have. On Twitter, I saw somebody included a picture of a jail cell and said a 6'1" man weighing 250 pounds hung himself from that window with a bed sheet, and it's this teeny tiny little, it on some levels it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know what the cell looked like that he was in, but that is a good point to raise about how difficult it might be for somebody to actually commit suicide in a jail cell.
Yeah, that was one of the things that stood out to me. I agree. I don't know what the jail cell looked like, but I would imagine that because suicide is a risk in prisons, that it would be difficult to hang anything from anywhere so that you could commit suicide. And so I'm wondering what was on the windows, or what was the kind of structure of the window such that he was able to tie a sheet to it that would withhold his weight and allow him to kind of just to suffocate himself amongst that weight.
It definitely gives rise to the idea that maybe somebody killed him.
So his lawyer is launching an investigation wanting to see what happened, because he said that there was no indication that Aaron Hernandez was kind of upset or, on the verge of suicide, that he had just given no indication either to his attorneys nor to his families that, he might be in a state of distress. So that's something that he wants to have looked into.
No suicide note.
There's no suicide note. So lots of people online are thinking that there was some foul play involved. It might have been individuals, whether it's inmates or guards at the prison, who might have been involved in it. But as I understand it, Aaron Hernandez was in a solitary cell. Not solitary confinement, but he had a cell to himself, a single cell. Yeah.
Right, and that he had apparently done something with the door that made it difficult for people to come to his aid.
He had obstructed the door from the inside. Yeah.
So I'm pretty just shocked by this. I mean, I thought we were going to be analyzing how he beat this double murder, which I was frankly more surprised that he beat the double murder than the fact that he was convicted for the Odin Lloyd murder. I thought this one was a little bit more clear cut. But I don't know what the jurors heard that I don't know. Do you have any idea what may have swayed them to believe that he was not guilty?
That's what I want to learn about that, because I haven't seen any kind of jurors speak about what allowed them to reach this verdict. I know that a few weeks ago we talked about the witness, the PhD student who came in as a witness to say that, a defense witness to say that Aaron Hernandez was gregarious and kind. He didn't seem upset the night that he saw him at the club. They had taken a picture together, because remember, one of the motives for the murder, this double murder, was that Aaron Hernandez had had a drink spilled on him and someone had stepped on his shoes, and he kind of went out and retaliated against those two individuals when he later saw them in the car.
Or he believed that one of those two individuals was the person that spilled the drink on him.
Exactly. So that PhD student was offered as a defense witness to show that no, he wasn't upset. There was no drink spilled on him, to kind of take away the prosecution's motive.
I could, as a juror, imagine somebody's pissed off that somebody spilled a drink on them. Then they see somebody else who is excited to see them, take a picture, you're fine, you kind of have it out of your head. But then he may have been re-enraged upon seeing them. No? You're laughing at me like that's ridiculous.
No, I actually think in the real world, it probably is. In my mind, it is ridiculous, because my thought is...
You've never been re-enraged upon seeing somebody who you felt did you wrong?
It's never been enough to make me want to go kill somebody.
Okay, fair enough.
Much less two people, for me. But people have done crazier things in this world, and have gotten upset over much smaller things and gone and killed people. So, and Aaron Hernandez had a history of violence and a history with the criminal justice system.
But these jurors didn't know all of that.
Right. These jurors didn't know that. But so I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I'm excited to see what the jurors say, why they acquitted him. It might have just been a lack of evidence. Were they able to find the gun that killed these individuals? Was there conflicting witness testimony?
Not sure who in the car pulled the trigger, or the jurors really believed. Remember the testimony of the two people who were with him that night were like, I don't remember anything that happened the whole week before, right? They had this giant gaping hole in their memory. I couldn't believe that anybody would find those witnesses to be credible. Maybe the jury did or didn't. But yeah, I too, in a weird legal nerd kind of way, am excited to hear about it, because when something that shocking comes down, I always want to try and understand how that went down.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and the standard is high, of course, beyond a reasonable doubt. So it has to be certain. You kind of need some level of a smoking gun or something that ties him to that.
But that's exactly why the Odin Lloyd murder conviction was more surprising, because that one was a lot more circumstantial than I thought this one was. And surprising on another front, I had no idea about this abatement thing. Maybe I was out the day that we covered that in law school, or they just skipped over that. But yeah, probably they skipped over that because I was in class every day. I was a nerd like that. But this whole deal about he is technically now an innocent man.
I saw something about that. Okay, so tell me more about what...
Okay, so apparently if you're convicted, but you appeal your conviction, and you are in the midst of that appeal when you die, and you don't get an, quote, I'm air quoting here, opportunity to completely flesh out that appeal, that the law sees you as an innocent person because you didn't get to fully take the legal system's opportunity to avail yourself of clearing your name. Okay, so either you missed that part too in class.
I definitely missed that
I don't
part.
think they covered
recall
that. But that was really interesting because I introduced the story as convicted murderer Aaron Hernandez is now called an innocent man. It's a kind of interesting thing
It's almost
in the law.
an oxymoron because he is in fact a convicted murderer.
But in the eyes of the law, because he died in the midst of his appeal, he's an innocent man. The law is generous in death.
I guess so. So
unless you've got to pay a lot of taxes, and then it's not so generous in death. But
I guess he gets to take that with him. I don't know what fine. That's unusual. I didn't realize that, but to no benefit to him, no benefit to his family.
And I guess unless his daughter maybe gets to, have this idea of her father, that her father was not a convicted murderer, perhaps. I mean, that of course is the saddest part of this. He's got a daughter. The victim, Odin Lloyd, also had a father. The people in the car, the double murder victim,
Furtado, Daniel de Abreu,
also had families. So, and another interesting thing that I saw on Twitter, somebody commented that every day 20 veterans commit suicide. Media says nothing. Aaron Hernandez, convicted murderer, commits suicide, and it is front page news. I guess we're also playing into that, but I did want to acknowledge that was a fair point and say it is awful that veterans are killing themselves, and that we don't cover that more often. I don't know how on this show we could cover that more often.
It's true, but I think we do have this notion where, celebrities, they seem kind of untouchable, they seem larger than life, they seem almost invincible, and so when they die, whether it's by suicide or by other means, it's always a shock, and so I guess that shock causes more attention.
That's a fair point too. All right. Moving on to a story that outraged me 1 second, and then finally I was like, oh, look at that. Officers can actually be fired when a video comes out, like almost right away. I wanted to check the records. Has action ever been taken this swiftly to fire officers? Let me back up for a second and tell you about the case of Demetrius Hollins. He's a 21-year-old college student who was pulled over because apparently he didn't have a license plate, although when he was pulled over, he tried to tell the officer, my license plate is in the rear view. Rear
of the car.
Thank you.
A rear view window, I guess. A rear window. There we go.
Thank you. And that was apparently not sufficient for the officer, who insisted that he step out of the car. And then in the report says that he resisted arrest. Right? Shaking your head. I know.
It was just awful. Again, one of these egregious cases, and I'm so glad that they actually had cell phone footage from the beginning, because a lot of the times when we don't see a cop fired, or we don't see disciplinary action taken against the cop, it's because the cell phone footage that only came after the incident had already started, or after the injury has already taken place, and we don't see the events that led up to the confrontation that can allow us to really accurately judge whether the individual was resisting arrest or whether the cop was using excessive force. And so this was one of those instances where we saw the beginning of the confrontation, and we saw the contradiction between the officer's police report of what he said happened and the actual cell phone footage, which you can't
in
deny.
This case, there were 2 cell phone videos. It's that one of them caught the initial offense, which is the officer who had pulled Demetrius over, literally punched him in the face while he had his hands up. That officer did not say anything about that in his recollection of the events.
In his police report, he wrote about how Demetrius was resisting arrest, how
bent over at the waist, how he turned, and this, that, and the other. No.
Yeah, none of which the cell phone footage did not corroborate that. We see Demetrius getting out of the car with both hands clearly in the air, and you see this officer
just
punch him or elbow him in the face.
Straight to the face. Then another cell phone video catches what so after he gets punched in the face, the officer tases him in the back, which knocks him down to the ground. Then another cell phone video shows a second officer arriving on the scene and literally stomping on his head. This all happened a week ago, just outside of Atlanta, and the two officers have now been fired. I was surprised that the reason for the firing was because, for one of them, was because he lied about the police report, the incidents as it went down, the guy who punched Demetrius in the face. The other one did actually get fired for the stomping, literally kicked the guy in the head while he was down in handcuffs.
Yeah, Officer McDonald, I believe, was the one who stomped on him, and he admitted there was an internal affairs investigation, and he admitted that he should not have kicked him and that he was wrong for doing so, and he got fired. But the other officer, Bongiovanni, said it's different. I think his quote was, "It's different in the streets."
Right.
Or something
when his
along
supervisor
those lines.
pointed out to him the contradiction between what he wrote in the report and what the video showed, the officer's reaction was, "Well, it's just different in the streets."
He showed no remorse.
No.
Whatsoever.
And and I was looking at a picture of the officers and their sort of like official portraits, almost looking, and they look like normal, nice, smiling guys who look like they're there to protect and serve. And it's just, but those are actually the face of evil. And I am really, really glad that both of these one incident caught two different angles, two different offenses on these cell phone videos. And actually, Demetrius himself tried to videotape what was going on because he had had an earlier run-in with that officer. That officer claims that Demetrius had, in a prior incident, reached for a loaded weapon under his seat, which is why he was extra aggressive with him, or so he claims. That has no justification, is no justification for what went down. Not at all okay. And in fact, there may be criminal charges against these officers.
And even better, I love the fact that the department then said that basically they've had to dismiss, well, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but they essentially had to drop the charges in other cases where these two officers were being called on as witnesses because basically they have no credibility at this point.
Yeah, it's like 88 cases where they were either the primary witness, arresting officer, or even just a witness that was going to be relied on. 88 cases just gone. And that's, it's great for those people who get a lot of...
But it's kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card for those that were actually guilty of doing whatever.
But what if any of those 88 cases actually, I don't know, was an actual murder or rape or dangerous robbery, and somebody goes scot-free? That's not great news for the community.
Because of this bad policing.
And I wish, I don't know what it's going to take for Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, to come out and say, you know what, it looks like we do have some bad apples and they're spoiling the bunch. Maybe we do need to do something about it. I don't know. I think I may grow to be 6 feet tall before something like that happens.
I think that's probably right. I think he would say exactly that. They're just some bad apples.
But he would stop there.
And we got them in this case. They were fired, and and that's it. We didn't need government oversight. I'm just saying that I think that would be his perspective.
It's probably true. But to think that these are the only officers that engage in this kind of behavior.
The whole thing it's just so frightening to me. I think every time I think of individuals who claim that they were victims of excessive force or that they didn't do anything wrong, they followed the procedures that they were supposed to follow, and then this happens to you. You get your face stomped in, you get tased, you get punched in the face, and absent this cell phone video, nothing would have happened. And left between this officer's report and Demetrius Hollins' word, every day, I think a jury would have sided with the officer.
Right. And so that whole argument about, hey, here's a concept. If you just cooperate with the police, you won't be punched. You won't be kicked.
Sometimes that's not even enough.
Not true. Just not true. And hopefully more and more people will come to recognize that with stories like this. But poor Demetrius, he thought he was going to die in this, and he says he wished this never happened to him. And on one hand, I wish it had not happened to him. On another, I am glad that this story is an example of you can comply and things can still go very wrong. And that this is an example of where officers were fired because those cell phone videos were out there. The department didn't release them. They were just released to the internet. So the police department had no control over when those videos went out. They kind of were just left to react.
So did the police department have the videos prior to them being released on the internet?
It didn't look like it from what I saw. They just saw that they were out there.
Well,
because they didn't know that there was such a video.
Well, I'm glad that they took swift action, and hopefully, in future instances, we'll see the same.
And let's see if there are any criminal charges.
Yeah, I believe they said that they were going to file.
I mean, they were investigating. We'll see what comes of that. That would be the ultimate justice. Not only charges, but then convictions. All right. I don't know if you heard this. I don't know where you stand on the death penalty, but the death penalty is back in the news again because the state of Arkansas is in a rush to execute like 11 prisoners because one of the drugs in the 3-drug cocktail is set to expire at the end of the month. And so they need to hurry up and get this done so that they have the medication. It's weird to call it a medication. The drugs to be able to carry out these executions. So these death row inmates have been, requesting stays of execution from judges, and one of them, Judge Wendell Griffin, did issue a temporary restraining order. He is responding to a lawsuit from the makers of one of the drugs. That drug maker doesn't want their drug to be used for this purpose. It wasn't intended for that purpose, and they said that they were misled into sending the state drug for this purpose. So that's fine. Sounds all fine and well. Sounds like a credible reason to halt the executions. Except then the judge goes to the next level. Yeah. Within an hour.
So he instituted the temporary restraining order in favor of this drug company.
Then he goes and within an hour of coming down with this decision, joins an anti-death penalty protest that's gathered outside the governor's mansion and ties himself to a gurney, as though he were dead, in a display of his personal feelings about the death penalty. As a background, was he a pastor? He was a religious leader as well as a lawyer, and has very strong feelings about the death penalty. And I do think that within a decade or so, we will probably find the death penalty is unconstitutional. But do you think it's an appropriate thing for a judge to protest at all, either laying on a gurney to appear dead, making his personal feelings about the death penalty known? I mean, yikes.
I think, judges are individuals as well, and they're entitled to their opinion.
Sort of, kind of.
But they do have a duty of they cannot, a duty of, they have to avoid the appearance of impropriety, and the cases that they sit on, we really do want to make sure that we have the public confidence to know that our judges are not partial to a certain side or not. And that was the issue in this case. So this judge was actually ordered to, to remove himself from the case because in violation of Arkansas's Code of Judicial Conduct, which says that you must recuse yourself when a judge has made a public statement that appears to commit the judge to reach a particular result or rule in a particular way. And I think one could easily say that someone who is very much so anti-death penalty, that would influence his decision in a case involving drugs used in connection with the death penalty.
And we could have seen from a mile away what he thought about the death penalty. He wrote in a blog that premeditated and deliberate killing of defenseless persons, including defenseless persons who have been convicted of murder, is not morally justifiable. Using medications designed for treating illness and preserving life to engage in such premeditated and deliberate killing is not morally justifiable. So he has some good points there, but morality is not exactly the law.
It isn't. And for him, this just might not have been the appropriate case for him to sit on. And so the Arkansas Supreme Court did remove him for that reason.
So now there's like 11 days before this drug expires.
Well, so interestingly enough, this medical drug company had filed a court in this Arkansas court, and then they had also filed another claim in a federal court, which was also the restraining order was granted in the federal court. So this medical drug company has actually called for the withdrawal of this verdict, essentially saying it renders it moot because the issue
court
has already been resolved in the federal court.
Okay, so these 11 people probably will not be executed by the end of the month. And part of this whole controversy comes from the fact that there is not a known perfect cocktail of drugs that are used to kill somebody in a way that, well, we can't guarantee that the death will be
unusual.
Yeah, that's the whole controversy, is that they want a combination of drugs that will be effective in killing somebody. Doesn't guarantee that you won't feel any pain, because there are no guarantees of that, but it cannot amount to something that appears to be cruel and unusual. And there have been some death row inmates who have taken hours to die and who have appeared to witnesses to be in agony during the time that they're dying. So I think this is going to come to a head. This is going to stay in our consciousness, in the news. I don't think that this is going away at all. But this is like the one time where I thought that a judge's First Amendment right to share his or her own ideas had gone too far, because we do need judges who follow the law. And I hate to quote our newest Supreme Court member, Neil Gorsuch, but during his confirmation hearings, he said, if you as a judge have liked every single decision you have made, you probably haven't followed the law. And I think this is one of those situations.
Although that's not to say that legally there couldn't have been support for why this temporary restraining order should have been granted, because there very well could have been legal support that this drug isn't effective in making sure that there's no pain
or that it was even allowed to be used for this purpose.
Right, really, because as we know, the drug company said that you really obtained these drugs by improper means.
Yeah.
You misled me. So it is possible that there were other legal grounds to sustain this temporary restraining order that didn't go towards, one's feelings on the death penalty. But it just so happens that because of his very outspoken, public posts on the death penalty, as a matter of his whatever disciplinary action or just ethics, he should have recused himself in this case.
Yeah, not only that, but I do think he's going to be in trouble for what he's done. But I feel for the guy. I mean, I would hate to be the judge who, I do think that he had good legal standing to say, this can't fly, I'm sustaining an injunction here. But to then go on and do that demonstration a little too far. Okay, speaking of going a little too far, Mark Geragos, celebrity attorney. Who is he represented? The one that comes to mind for me most often is Chris Brown. Oh, right, you too? Okay. But definitely a
celebrity attorney.
Yeah, I hate that term, but I guess if there was ever a celebrity attorney, Mark Geragos would be one. And he was representing Kesha a couple years ago in an ongoing case against Dr. Luke when he heard Lady Gaga make some reference to being sexually assaulted. I was going to say while she was on the Howard Stern show, but that makes it sound like she was assaulted while on Howard Stern's show. No, when she was on Howard Stern's show, Lady Gaga talked about having been sexually assaulted. And Mark Garagos tweeted out, guess who the rapist was? He's got 48,000 followers. And somebody responded with Dr. Luke's first name. And Garagos's reply was #bingo. And then he told TMZ that he said that because, or he tweeted that because it's true. Lady Gaga has said it's not. But that led Dr. Luke to file a defamation claim against Mark Garagos. And this is pretty unusual because most of the time attorneys seem kind of immune from what they say about their cases. And Mark Garagos thought that he was going to be able to really quickly toss this defamation suit out. Not so much. New York judge says you're going to have to face this.
Yeah, so or at least that this individual, Dr. Luke, has at least stated claims that are plausible and could that he could win on going forward. Not to say that he has won on the defamation claims, but he has at least viable claims he has stated.
Yeah, and I thought that what Mark Garagos offered as reasons why this case should be thrown out are kind of funny. First of all, he says that this isn't a defamation case because what he said was an opinion, not an assertion of a fact. I am of the opinion. I mean, those tweets kind of, I sound like Sean Spicer now. Those tweets speak for themselves. But really, it doesn't seem like he's saying, I believe, I think.
Right. He says, when you say bingo, that means you've got it.
You know, right.
Dr. Luke is the rapist.
And another defense of Mark Garagos was that in using the term bingo, it was obvious that he was just being playful. That's his defense.
Again, I don't.
No,
not a defense.
That's not going to work for me either.
Defamation.
And then he tried to claim that it was privileged because it was under the guise of his representation of Kesha. But this was about Lady Gaga, so that seems like quite a stretch.
And your privilege is between you and your client, not between.
Well, you are on behalf of your client. Like Mark Garagos plenty of times has come out to say, Chris Brown did not do this, that, or the other. My client is innocent, and the facts will show this, that, and the other. Attorneys say that all the time, and even when a jury finds that their client is guilty, nobody then goes after the attorney for saying something that wasn't true. Even if an attorney said, it wasn't my client that did it, it was that guy. Mm-hmm. Well, then whoever that guy is not able to file a defamation claim against the attorney. They're immune, basically, to that. So that's why this case is pretty bizarre. But this comment was not about Kesha. It wasn't about his client. It wasn't about defending her or anything that had to do related to the claim that Kesha had against Dr. Luke. So I didn't buy that either. Neither did the judge, and this case is going forward.
Right, and then he also tried to distinguish even between the type of website that had published it. I think in going to the, this isn't serious. It's all. I use the term bingo. It's kind of facetious. He also tried to say, look, this was reported on TMZ, which is an entertainment website,
not a news
versus
site.
a CNN or a MSNBC or some sort of news site. Yeah,
that's
so I mean, as a litigator, you have to get
throwing
creative.
TMZ under the bus, which ironically, I don't know this, but TMZ often can seem more factual and accurate, even though the way they put things is very informal and sort of just short, pithy statements.
It's entertainment news, but it's still news.
It's news about entertainment, but it's still. It seems to me that it's pretty newsworthy. I haven't even heard Donald Trump go after TMZ as being fake news.
They check their sources. Check their sources. So one of the things that he also said was that this is a matter of public interest, which kind of lowers the
bar for
which would lower the bar for Mark Garagos, and he lacked actual malice. I guess when you're talking about a public figure or a celebrity, malice needs to be involved. So those were some other defenses that Mark Garagos was trying to use.
Those are defenses to the actual claim, but they're not a defense that would toss out the claim to begin with.
Right.
So This should be fun to follow. All right. Speaking of following, this case, this will not die, and it gets more ridiculous as the days go on. So Sofia Vergara's ex is trying to force the birth of embryos that he created with Sofia.
Is he trying to force the birth? So I wasn't actually sure what this guy was trying to do with these embryos. Does she want to destroy them, or does he want to?
She doesn't want to destroy them. She wants to leave them frozen. He wants them to be born. He first tried to sue her to do that in a California case, and the judge told Nick Loeb that he was going to have to turn over the name of 2 ex-girlfriends who had had abortions. And he didn't want to do that, so he dropped that case. Then he went to this thing where he created a trust for these embryos, gave them names, Emma and Isabella, and then he is suing to allow them for their right to life, right? So Sofia's response was, this is nuts. I mean, her response wasn't anything newsworthy. We wouldn't have covered it if that's what it was. But now his response saying that she is impeding his First Amendment rights to file this claim. What? Can you see any way to make sense of that?
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you can file your claim, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to get tossed out. So he's established the trust of the kids of these embryos in Louisiana.
Kids and embryos, big difference.
Of the embryos in Louisiana, he's filed his claim, and
I mean, she's trying to say this is, breach of contract, yada yada yada, and he's like, no, it's not. There was no contract between the 2 of them. Their contract was with the place where
the fertility clinic,
right? I mean, just crazy, nutty attempts, and then he's like, oh, and by the way, you can't try and stop me from this, because if you are violating my First Amendment rights. I mean, this is just redonkulous. I mean, first of all, Sofia to say that the government would be violating somebody's First Amendment rights by tossing out a lawsuit would mean that no lawsuit can ever be tossed. That makes no sense. I was hoping that maybe somebody could show me where he had even a scintilla of possible credibility in there, but not so much.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen over time, he seems to be kind of grasping at straws, maybe to remain relevant. Now, this guy, I believe, he I can't remember he comes from, I think, somewhat of a wealthy family, but has had a couple of roles in television and film, and so maybe he's just really trying to preserve his name and preserve a claim to fame and kind of keep his name in the news, and this is his way to do it. Sofia Vergara, I guess, is his ticket.
Yikes, that is ugly. All right, well, that does it for us. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Justice is Served. Please be sure to come back next week. In the meantime, like, comment, tweet at either of us or both of us. At Chelsea Galicia.
And I'm at Yems on Twitter and Instagram.
All right, everybody. See you next time, or hear you next time, or listen to you next time. I don't know, one of those.
From executives Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio, Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.